Your child is only a few steps away. You glance toward the fire for just a moment. When you turn back, they're gone. At first, you don't panic. Maybe they wandered behind a tree. Maybe they're picking up stones near the river. Maybe they're laughing, waiting for you to find them. You call their name. Nothing. You call again. Only the wind answers. Your heart begins to race. The forest suddenly feels larger than it did a moment ago. Every shadow looks different. Every sound feels wrong. Somewhere out there, your child is alone. And with every passing second, the wilderness becomes more dangerous. No maps, no roads, no rescue teams. Just a world where one wrong turn could mean disappearing forever. What would you do? More importantly, what would our ancient ancestors have done? Archaeologists can't tell us the story of one missing child. No ancient diary survived. No cave painting records the search. No fossil can reveal the fear a parent felt while calling into the darkness. But scattered across caves, ancient campsites, footprints preserved in stone, and carefully buried children are clues, not to one family's tragedy, but to the world every prehistoric family faced. If a child disappeared thousands of years ago, the outcome was never guaranteed. Yet the way ancient humans lived may tell us how they responded when every heartbeat mattered. To understand that, we first have to understand something surprising. For most of human history, children didn't grow up behind walls. They grew up inside nature itself. Their playground was the same landscape that fed their families. Dense forests, open grasslands, rocky valleys, frozen plains. Every day, children watched adults gather food, carry water, shape tools, and read the land. They learned by following, by observing, by exploring. But curiosity has always been one of childhood's greatest strengths and one of its greatest dangers. Modern children can disappear in shopping malls or crowded streets. A prehistoric child could disappear into an entire wilderness. That doesn't mean ancient parents were careless. Far from it. Archaeology paints a very different picture. Across Europe, Asia, Africa, and other regions, researchers have uncovered carefully prepared burials for infants and children dating back tens of thousands of years. Some were laid to rest with ornaments, others were covered with red ochre, a pigment often associated with symbolic burial practices. These discoveries don't tell us exactly how every community thought, but they reveal something difficult to ignore. Children mattered. Families invested time, care, and emotion into their youngest members. Anthropologists also believe that humans succeeded partly because raising a child was rarely the job of two parents alone. Grandparents, older siblings, other relatives, trusted members of the group. Humans are one of the few species known for extensive cooperative childcare, a strategy that likely helped our ancestors survive environments where no one could succeed entirely alone. So imagine the moment that child doesn't return. One person notices first, then another. Conversations stop. Someone scans the tree line. Another checks the riverbank. Within moments, the entire camp understands something is wrong. This is where our evidence becomes more limited. No archaeological site preserves the footsteps of a prehistoric search party. No fossil tells us who ran first or who stayed behind. What follows is not a documented event. It is a reconstruction built from what archaeology confirms, what anthropology reasonably infers, and what still remains unknown. One thing, however, is almost certain. Time was the enemy. Every minute made the search harder. The sun kept moving, the wind kept blowing, and the land itself began erasing every clue. Somewhere nearby, a small set of footprints may already be fading, and whether those tracks lead toward safety or deeper into the wilderness depends on what happens next. At first, the signs are easy to read. A patch of crushed grass, a fresh footprint pressed into soft mud, a broken twig that wasn't there this morning. To most people, they mean nothing. To an experienced hunter, they are a story. Long before writing existed, ancient humans learned to read the ground itself. A footprint could reveal direction. The depth of a step could hint at speed. A disturbed leaf, a scraped rock. Even the way branches bent could reveal where something or someone had passed. Archaeology supports this remarkable ability. Ancient footprints preserved in hardened sediments show just how closely prehistoric people moved through their environment. Combined with evidence of successful hunts across difficult landscapes, scientists agree that our ancestors possessed extraordinary tracking skills. But even the greatest tracker had one enemy they could never defeat: nature. A gust of wind lifts loose dust across the trail. The next footprint becomes harder to see. The child crosses a patch of bare rock. The trail simply ends. You spread out, looking for anything: a snapped stem, a tiny handprint, a pebble pushed out of place. Every second feels heavier than the last, because while the adults are searching, the child is still alone. Imagine being only 5 years old. The voices you know have disappeared. Every tree looks unfamiliar. Every direction seems right, until none of them are. At first, you might keep walking. You think the camp must be just over the next hill. Then another, and another. Without realizing it, every step carries you farther away. This is one of the cruelest realities of becoming lost. People rarely know the exact moment they stop searching and start wandering. Modern survival experts still warn that panic often causes lost people to move farther from safety. We cannot know whether every prehistoric child reacted the same way, but human fear has deep evolutionary roots, making this a reasonable possibility rather than a certainty. Then another danger arrives, not with a roar, but with silence. The wilderness doesn't need to attack immediately. It simply waits. As daylight fades, temperatures begin to change. If the air is cold, a small child's body loses heat much faster than an adult's. If the day is hot, dehydration becomes an invisible threat. The child grows tired, hungry, confused. These dangers were often just as deadly as any predator. Popular stories usually imagine giant beasts lurking behind every tree. Reality was more complicated. Depending on where and when our ancestors lived, the landscape could hold wolves, lions, hyenas, leopards, bears, crocodiles, or large snakes. Earlier prehistoric worlds even included formidable predators that disappeared long before recorded history. But predators were opportunists. They were only one piece of a much larger survival puzzle. A swollen river could be fatal. A hidden ravine. Loose rocks beneath small feet. A sudden storm. One wrong step was sometimes all it took. Back at the camp, another battle is unfolding. Not against the wilderness, but against time. Some members of the group continue searching. Others remain behind. Someone must protect the youngest children. Someone must guard the fire. Someone must watch for danger. Did every prehistoric community divide these responsibilities in the same way? We don't know. No archaeological discovery can answer that question directly. But anthropology suggests that hunter-gatherer groups constantly balanced individual needs with the survival of the entire community. That balance would never have been easy, especially when every passing moment made hope a little more fragile. Then, someone stops. They kneel beside the ground. There, barely visible, a single tiny footprint, fresh enough to matter. The search isn't over, but neither is the mystery. Where is the trail leading? And who, or what, will reach the child first? The footprint points uphill. Then another appears. For the first time since the search began, there is hope. The group moves faster, not recklessly. Every person knows that rushing can destroy the very clues they're trying to follow. A careless step could erase the child's trail forever, so they move with urgency and patience. Two instincts pulling in opposite directions. This is where prehistoric experience may have made the greatest difference. For thousands of generations, humans survived by noticing details most of us would never see. A broken reed near a stream, fresh mud clinging to a stone, a bird suddenly taking flight. None of these proves where the child has gone, but together they can begin to tell a story. Scientists believe this extraordinary awareness evolved because our ancestors depended on it every single day. Finding food, avoiding danger, protecting one another. The same skills that help track wounded animals may also have been used to search for vulnerable members of the group. That is a reasonable inference, but we cannot say with certainty how anyone's search unfolded. Then, the trail disappears again. The ground becomes hard. Wind has swept away the loose soil. Rain begins to fall. Nature is wiping the landscape clean. Every minute that passes makes the next clue less likely to survive. As daylight fades, the search becomes even more dangerous. The people looking for the child are no longer the only ones at risk. Darkness changes everything. Predators become harder to see. Steep ground becomes invisible. A single injury could turn one tragedy into many. Now comes the question archaeology cannot answer. How long did they keep searching? An hour? Until sunrise? For days? We simply don't know. No campsite preserves that decision. No ancient skeleton records the moment began to fade. What we do know is that prehistoric life demanded impossible choices. Every person searching consumed energy. Every hour away from camp reduced the time available to gather food. The fire needed tending. The youngest children still needed protection. The elderly still depended on the group. Choosing to continue searching carried risks. Choosing to stop carried a different kind of pain. There was no perfect answer, only consequences. And this silence in the evidence tells us something important. Archaeology is incredibly powerful. It can reveal how tools were made, how people hunted, where they traveled, even what they ate. But it rarely captures moments like these. The greatest fear, the hardest decisions, the quiet cries carried into the wind, often leave no trace at all. Most prehistoric people were never preserved as fossils. Many who died left nothing for us to discover. Bones decay, scavengers scatter remains, floods reshape landscapes. Entire generations can disappear without leaving a single recoverable clue. That means some of humanity's most emotional stories are lost forever. Not because they never happened, but because time erased them. And yet something remarkable survived. Across prehistoric sites, archaeologists have uncovered children buried with extraordinary care. Some were placed gently into the earth. Some were accompanied by ornaments. Others were covered with red ochre in what many researchers interpret as symbolic burial practices. Elsewhere, scientists have found evidence that injured and vulnerable individuals were cared for long enough to recover from severe disabilities that they could not have survived alone. These discoveries cannot tell us what happened to one missing child, but they reveal something just as important. Prehistoric humans invested in one another. They protected, they mourned, they cared. Their world was unimaginably dangerous, yet compassion endured within it. So, was the child found? The honest answer is, we don't know. Perhaps the tiny footprints eventually led back to waiting arms. Perhaps the voices calling through the trees were finally answered. Or perhaps this became one of the countless prehistoric stories that vanished without a trace, remembered only by the people who lived through it. Archaeology cannot choose between those possibilities, neither can we. But maybe that isn't the most important question, because this story was never really about one child. It was about the people searching. For generations, prehistoric humans have been imagined as fearless hunters, battling predators and struggling against the elements. They certainly did those things, but they also gathered around fires with their families. They celebrated new life, they protected the vulnerable, and when someone they loved disappeared, they almost certainly felt the same fear that would grip any parent today. The next time you picture our ancient ancestors, don't imagine distant, emotionless survivors. Imagine a mother listening for one familiar voice, a father scanning the ground for one more footprint, a family refusing to give up hope as darkness closed around them. We may never know how their story ended, but the evidence tells us something even more profound. Long before cities, long before kingdoms, long before history was ever written, love was already shaping humanity, and in a world filled with danger, it may have been our greatest survival tool.